Okay, good evening everyone, and welcome to those online and live. I'll just actually post again for those who have joined, the link to the handout if you didn't manage to download it. I'll put it on the YouTube recording also. Okay, so I wanted to speak about a theme that links Sefiras HaOmer and this week's Parsha. So we'll start off with Sefiras HaOmer from quoting a pasuk actually we read last week. The mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer, Sfartim Lachem. There is a mitzvah you should count for yourselves. Mimochos HaShabbos, from the day after the Shabbos. Not our topic for discussion this week, but that's taken to mean the day after the first day of Pesach, for whatever reason. Miyom Haviachem as Omer, from the day that you bring the Omer, the wave offering, to Nufa, Sheva Shabbos to Mistyana, 7 complete weeks. So this is the mitzvah of Sefiras HaOmer. Now there is a very famous Sefer HaChinuch on this mitzvah. We've spoken about the Sefer HaChinuch before, written anonymously, but we think by the Rabbi Halevi of Barcelona. And in the introduction, he says he wrote it as a book of education for his son. He had a son, it seems, who was wavering a little bit and needed some inspiration. And he wrote this mitzvah, which is a summary of all 613 commandments. And it's basically the summary of each mitzvah with a brief halachic synopsis and then a sort of explanation or reason behind the mitzvah. And he calls the reasons shorashei ha-mitzvah, the roots of the mitzvahs. Last week, actually, we spoke about reasons behind mitzvahs, and I mentioned that reasons behind mitzvahs are generally called ta'amei ha-mitzvahs, the taste of the mitzvah, because this isn't the cause of the mitzvah or the reason of the mitzvah. The reason we do it is ultimately because this is what Hashem commanded, but we have a taste in the mitzvahs. But he calls it the shorashei ha-mitzvah, the root of the mitzvah. In other words, he sees mitzvahs as growing out of more profound ideas. So you have a root, which is the underground idea, the sort of core concept, and the mitzvah is something that grows out of it, that expresses how one is the result of that sort of fundamental idea that lies behind it. And he says, "Mishorshei ha-mitzvah, I'll start a Parshat from the roots of the mitzvah on the Parshat level, on the simple level. If you should call ikram shel Yisrael Torah, the whole fundamental uniqueness of the Jewish people is because of the Torah. That's why we were redeemed. And that's why we arose to greatness. And therefore, we are commanded limnos to count Pesach from the day after the first day of Pesach, ad yom nesilas haTorah, to the day of the giving of the Torah. Laharis b'nashenu, to show in our souls hachefetz hagadol, the great desire hanichbod v'hanichsaf l'Rabbeinu, for that which is important and longed for. Ke'eved yishav tzel, like a slave who desires relief. V'yimne tomid, and will count constantly. Mosayover ha'is, when will come the time hanichsaf, that's longed for, hanichsavelov, that's longed for, shiyotze lecheres, that they will go out to freedom. Ki aminyan mare ba'adam, because counting shows ki chol yishuv v'chol chefto lagia lezmanahu, that one's whole hope and desire is to reach, and longing is to reach that time, and therefore we count the Omer. So this is a very famous chinuch, which the chinuch explains that the idea behind counting Sefiras HaOmer is to demonstrate our longing for the day of Matan Torah, and he adds into that this is the whole really uniqueness and status of the Jewish people is because of Matan Torah. Without Matan Torah, we are but people amongst people. We for all our pride in everything we've achieved, our uniqueness is ultimately because of the Torah. Without the Torah, we're just a small group amongst many other groups, and therefore we count towards Shavuos. Now, the most fundamental question on this theory or explanation of the chinuch is that normally speaking, when we anticipate an event, we count down rather than up. This is something I've actually discussed on other occasions, given different answers to. But normally speaking, we count down rather than up when we are anticipating an event. So if you have a holiday coming or a birthday, a child perhaps is longing for a birthday or the like, one counts towards that date with anticipation, with eager anticipation, with longing. I mean, that's what he's talking about over here. So you have 30 days to go to the holiday, not 29 days, 28 days, 27 days. That's normally how one would expect to count. And yet, Sefiras HaOmer doesn't behave like that. We count up. How many days have we counted since Omer HaTanufa, since the Omer offering? And there are those who therefore profoundly disagree with the chinuch's explanation of the mitzvah. They say this simply isn't correct. In fact, the very text of the Omer and the halachic workings of it, and the formula that we say in advance of counting, and the language of the pasuk, all seem to bring to question this explanation of the chinuch. We count mimochras hashabbos from the day after Pesach, miyom haviyach HaOmer from the day of the bringing of the Omer. We call it Sefiras HaOmer, the count of the Omer. We say before we do the count, we say the psukim, which we reference that this is following the bringing of the Omer. And indeed, there's a halachic argument as to whether the mitzvah even applies nowadays when we don't have an Omer offering. It may quite literally be triggered by the bringing of the carbon Omer. And in a post-Beis HaMikdash era where we don't have a carbon Omer, we may not be obligated at all min HaTorah to count. Maybe our whole counting is only Drabanan, or perhaps not. Maybe we are obligated because nonetheless this is Miyom Haviyach HaMes Omer. This is the day of the bringing of the Omer. But certainly the suggestion of the Chinuch that this counting towards Shavuos doesn't seem to be entirely clear in the Psukim, and doesn't seem entirely clear in the nature of the count, where we count how many days have passed from Pesach as opposed to how many days are heading towards this anticipated date. Okay, so that's a background question, or starting a trigger question. What I want to do now is leave that question on the side and look at an entirely different matter. Something that actually I touched a while back on in my Sunday morning philosophy shiurim, when we were looking at the nature of this world and the next world and Olam HaBa, and I want to visit it as a separate topic, and then hopefully tie these two things together. And the source of this discussion are two quotes from Rabbi Yaakov. The first quote is in source 3. It's a Gemara in Kedushin, quoting Rabbi Yaakov, by the way, is a Tana, so he's a Mishnaic era figure. He's not an Amora. He is he's from the era of the Mishnah. Nonetheless, the Gemara brings a brisa. Very briefly, the quote, the Tanoim taught numerous halachas and numerous ideas, and many of which were collated by Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi into the Mishnah. But many of their lines and teachings did not enter into the Mishnah and remained outside. The literal meaning of the brisa is outside. These were oral traditions that were passed down. They were not part of the Mishnah, and they remained brisas. They remained outside sources. And the Gemara is quoting one such source. Some of them were collated by later figures, like Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi's nephew, Rabbi Chia, into the Tosefta. But either way, here the Gemara is quoting a Tanaitic source that we don't have a Mishnah for, but was a tradition that the Amoraim had. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, Rabbi Yaakov says, Schar mitzvah b'hai al maleka. Reward for mitzvahs is not to be found in this world. This is a Gemara in Kedushin. It's part of the context of Gemara in Kedushin that discusses mitzvahs like kabed es avicha v'es, honor your parents, leman yarich nimecha, in order that one should have a lengthy life. And they discuss, the Gemara there's discussing whether mitzvahs have rewards in this world. Shiur Hakan famously has such a reward. The Gemara brings the story of Acher, who witnessed someone ascending a tree to do shiur hakan at the commands of their father, so a combination of the two mitzvahs that are meant to lead to long life, and fell off the tree and tragically died, and that led to him questioning all Torah. So Rabbi Yaakov is of the opinion that there is schar mitzvah b'hai al maleka, there is no reward in this world. Mishnah in Ovis, source 4, Rabbi Yaakov Omer, ha'olam hazeh domen aprusdor mipnei olam haba. Olam hazeh is like a corridor in front of the next world. Huskin atzmacha b'prusdor, prepare yourself in the corridor, kadesh konis atraklin, so that one can enter into the palace. So this is a mission of us. It's giving us a bit of mussar. And Rabbi Yaakov says, view this world as a corridor, a passageway. It doesn't have its own fundamental importance. No one lives in a passageway. This world is a place of journeying in order, and impermanence, it has no permanence, in order to arrive at the next world. And this represents, it's the same Rabbi Yaakov, right? This is the same Rabbi Yaakov, represents a very important school of thought, that really this world is not the world of rewards, it's not the world of permanence, it's just a means somewhere else. It's well known that a very famous story with the Chafetz Chaim, in which someone came to visit the Chafetz Chaim, yeah, familiar with the story, and was astounded at the modesty of the Chafetz Chaim's home. In fact, when he was invited into the Chofetz Chaim's house, he was moved to inquire, where's all your furniture, Rabbi? Like, what's going on over here? This was a visitor, according to the way the story is transmitted, this was a Jewish visitor from America. And turns to Chofetz Chaim and said, where's all your furniture? He was brought into in the shtetl houses, they had very limited rooms, and there was sort of a chair and a table, perhaps, or something of the sort. To which the Chofetz Chaim said, where's your furniture? And he said, what do you mean? I'm just traveling. I don't travel with furniture. The Chofetz Chaim responds, I'm also just traveling. Right? My life is that of I'm a traveling man. My life is that of a traveler. That's how he viewed Olam HaBa. Arguably, by the way, if we ask ourselves sort of the core messages of Judaism, like what's Yiddishkeit really about? This would probably be one of the candidates for the top three lines, the top three messages. If we ask ourselves what would a world look like without an Avraham Avinu, without the core messages of Yiddishkeit? So monotheism maybe is one very central message of Yiddishkeit. Not maybe, clearly, a central message of Yiddishkeit. But certainly another very central message of Yiddishkeit is that we're not here for this world. Our life is meant to be about that which is beyond. Maybe there's pagan cultures or other philosophies, materialism and so on, which sees this existence as our real existence. And that's not how we talk of it. We refer to Olam HaBa, the world of truth, and so on. I used to live in near, not far from the Sanhedria cemetery. The Beis Olam there in Sanhedria, quite a well-known cemetery. It's a distinguished cemetery with a lot of important people buried there. And it used to have a sign across the doors in very, very large letters. And every day, when we lived in Israel for many, many years before we moved back here, and every day I used to pass this on my bus journey, and it has a very sobering, emblazoned and very large letters across the arch. It had the following text: Beis Moyed L'chol Chai, the meeting house, the meeting place for all living beings. And every day I used to pass there, and depending on my mood, some days it would make me reflective, some days I found it a little depressing, some days it was perhaps an important message to remind myself of. But Beis Moed L'chol Chai, right? We're here today, and this is the meeting place of all living beings. That was what the architects that designed the entrance to the cemetery is put up there. A Beis HaChaim, yeah, a house of living. This is the true life. Olam HaBa, the true base of the place of truth. This is the real existence. Okay, so this is a summary of what's clearly quite an important and central theme in Yiddishkeit. I didn't give my third central theme of my top three candidates, but I think the point is clear. The problem with all of this is that when you actually open the Torah, it doesn't look like that. And when you open the Torah, it seems to be not only a very earthy document, a very earthy book in terms of what it instructs us to do, but also in terms of the consequences of our behavior. So Torah, as we know, is not doesn't put forward a monastic life, an ascetic life. It wants us to engage in this world and be part of it in many respects. And good, that's because somehow we're meant to elevate ourselves through so doing. But the rewards, famously, that the Torah offers are very earthly also. One could bring numerous psukim to demonstrate this, but because we are in Parsha's Bechukosei, I chose psukim from Bechukosei, and this is a very central theme of Bechukosei, right? When we open our Chumash this week, when we listen to Kriyas Torah, the message will be that of reward and punishment. Where? In this world. I mean, that's what the psukim say. I printed this at the bottom of page 1. Again, for those online, I see a few people have joined since I did this, so I'll just very quickly post the full sheet again. You can download this at the bottom of page 1, second half of the page. Parshas Bechukosei. Im Bechukosei Teilechu, if you walk with my statutes, you keep my commandments. The rain will come in their season, the land will give its produce, the trees of the fruits will yield their produce, you'll be militarily successful, and so on and so forth. And there are 13 pasukim like this, 12 pasukim like this of brachas. All of them, bar basically one, are about material and physical success. You'll be strong on a military level, your country will flourish, you'll have wealth, you'll have prosperity, you'll have health, you have all good material things. I mean, nothing bad about that, but this certainly doesn't seem in line with this. Pasuk 12 is the spiritual one. Hashem says, I will walk amongst you, and I'll be for you as a God, and you will be for me as a people. But that's it. Seems a very physical reward. Similarly, the continuation of the Psukim, if you don't listen to me, I'll scatter you amongst the nations, I will draw the sword after you, your land shall be a desolation, I'll send fear into your hearts, the sound of a fallen leaf shall chase them, and they shall flee as one flees from the sword. Really, many more Psukim actually. Here we're talking about 40, 50 Psukim of the famous Tochacha. Psukim that I think anyone reads and shudders at to this day. When we read about the sounds of a falling leaf terrifying us, and then one reads history, Jewish history, and the memoirs of people that went through in really in our own generation, in our lifetimes and the lifetime of our parents, and one sees what they went through, and they describe literally this language of leaves, falling leaves being terrifying. Okay, this is a theme throughout the Torah. Bechukosei is perhaps the most extreme example we could have chosen, but in many respects, actually, we reference this in Kriya Shema also, right? And every day when we say Kriya Shema, basically, if you keep the mitzvahs, you will prosper, and if you do the averos, you will have drought and famine. So there's really two questions that emerge out of this. The first question is, why is there so much about this world? If Schar Mitzvah Hayal Malaka, then what on earth is going on with all these psukim? I mean, Rabbi Yaakov's statement is an astounding statement. There's no rewards for mitzvahs in this world. Is flatly contradicted by the vast majority of the Torah. So this is the first question. The second question is, why is there so little mention of Olam HaBa? Why is there no mention of the world to come? In fact, it's a massive lacuna in the whole Torah. It's a hole in the whole Torah. There's very little in the Torah about spiritual life, post-death, reward and punishment in Olam HaBa. The Nevi'im reference it, but Torah has virtually no reference at all. In fact, I'm not going to go through all the answers, but Orach Chaim lists many answers to this question. He has a very lengthy piece at the beginning of the Sedra in which he discussed at length this question. Why is there no mention of Olam HaBa? We know, by the way, that there was a serious group in Klal Yisrael who broke away from mainstream, what we would call mainstream Judaism, based on this very question, right? On this very, the Sadducees, the Tzaddokim, based on this very question, and denied the existence of Olam HaBa. So, in fact, we'll learn later one of the sources that led to them denying the existence of Olam HaBa. But when you learn Torah Shebechsav, you can see where they're coming from in many respects. In fact, it's beyond a reference to the fact of spiritual existence. There's basically nothing. The only reference we really have to Olam HaBa in the Torah is Koris, right? So there's reference to spiritual excision, to non-spiritual existence, and according to how Chazal understands it, L'man yarichan yomecha, the reference of immortal life, arichas yomim, what they call arichas yomim. But beyond the very basic fact of immortal life, of arichas yomim on the one hand, and spiritual excision on the other hand, there's no real reference to Olam HaBa. Why not? Where is it? Why is this not a significant part of the Torah? So these are very, very serious questions, and no less a figure than the Rambam discusses to a degree these questions. And the first source I want to look at on the Rambam on this is page 2, at the top of page 2 in the handout, a Rambam in Hilchos Teshuvah. Now, the background to this is...
You're about to explain why they brought us.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I don't know exactly where I was lost, but one of the mysteries in the Torah is there's very little mention of Olam HaBa, other than the facts of spiritual excision, koris, and spiritual existence, the way Chazal understands it, L'man yarichan yomecha, and that's really it. Now, one of the important sources that discusses this is, and I don't know if you heard me say this, but this was indeed the cause of a split in Klal Yisrael in which the Tzaddokim, the Sadducees, denied the existence of Olam HaBa because of the lacuna, the lack of mention of it, at least in Chomishei Torah, even though the Nevi'im do speak a little bit about it. So one of the important figures who address this question is the Rambam in Hilchos Teshuvah, and I was just explaining that Hilchos Teshuvah in general is the source of where the Rambam discusses a lot about spirituality, spiritual makeup, spiritual existence. He starts off obviously talking about sin and repentance. That's the main theme of Hilchos Teshuvah, the idea of Teshuvah. Then he speaks about the loss of spiritual identity, how we can destroy our spiritual identity. when he speaks about his famous 13 principles, faith, and then he speaks about other aspects of what it means to be a spiritual being, bechira, free will, and then he moves from that into talking about what Olam HaBa is, what the world to come is, the world of spiritual existence. At the beginning of chapter 9, Tes in Hilchos Shiur, he really asks our question, and he says as follows at the top of page 2 at the beginning of chapter 9. Since it is known, as we've explained, since it is known that the true reward for mitzvahs and the good which we will merit is the world to come, and the retribution which is extracted from the wicked is koris, in other words, spiritual non-existence. What is this which is written in the whole Torah? That in this world we will receive reward. Kagon, as we asked, Sova Varav, plenty and famine, Milchama v'Shalom, war and peace, Malchus v'Shiflus, kingship and subjugation, Yeshiva Sa'oretz v'Golos, settlement of land and exile, Vasachas Master v'Sedot, success and non-success, Shakal Divrabis, and all other covenantal promises. So here the Rambam asks our question, which is, why is the Torah full of physical rewards and punishments? And the answer is, all these things are true. They are and will be. None of these are the ultimate reward shall mitzvahs. Nor these are the ultimate vengeance over al kol mitzvahs that are avenged against those who don't keep the mitzvahs. But the resolution of the matter is as follows. HaKadosh Baruch Hu nosam lanu Torah zu eitz chaim. Hashem gave us the Torah, which is a tree of life. Now, by the way, when the Rambam uses a metaphor, he uses it for a reason. So if he defines the Torah here as eitz chaim, as a tree of life, there's a reason he's using that for his definition. And anyone who does anything in the Torah, merits to it, it's a spiritual life. But if you go to Masov, depending on the greatness of their teeth and the extent of their knowledge, so they achieve spiritual life. Okay, so what the Rambam has said so far is that previously I've explained that the true world of rewards and punishment is in the world to come. Question, in that case, why is the Torah so full of material success and failure as reward and punishment? Answer the Rambam, well, it's true. It is true that all these things will happen. In other words, I do believe, says the Rambam, that material success and prosperity and material struggle are in certain special ways linked to how we behave spiritually. Nonetheless, the true place of reward is the world to come, based upon our deeds and our wisdom. By the way, this is very Maimonidean, say Rambam, which he says the world of reward and punishment is linked not just to action, but also to intellect, to wisdom. Rambam thinks that wisdom is very central to human perfection. Other schools of thought say it's not necessarily about what you know, but what you do. But the Rambam thinks that what you know is and believe and think and understand is very primary to what a person is, and also a very key part of spirituality. Nonetheless, says the Rambam, the Torah promises us, if we do the Torah, if we benefit from the Torah continually, there will be removed from us all things that stop us being able to do it, like war and famine and sickness and the like. And similarly, he will grant us all the good which will reinforce our performance of the Torah, such as plenty and peace and an abundance of wealth, in order that we don't have to be involved through all our days in matters of material pursuit, but rather we can sit unburdened, able to study Torah and mitzvahs and wisdom and so on. And similarly, says the Rambam, if we consciously abandon the Torah and involve ourselves in the vanities of the time, then Hashem will remove from us the benefits of the world which reinforce the rebellion of those who abandon them. Okay, so what the Rambam here is saying is that the true place of reward and punishment is the next world. Nonetheless, our behavior influences in a certain type of way our material prosperity and success in this world. And in principle, famous words, all else being equal, if we follow the path of the Torah, then we will be given material health and wealth and safety and prosperity. in order that we can keep the mitzvahs of the Torah and focus on its wisdom. However, if we neglect the study of Torah and the learning and performance of mitzvahs, and instead we absorb ourselves in that which is temporal and trivial, the vanities of the time, then we will lack material success and prosperity, because these only serve to drive us away from the true good. In other words, what the Rambam is saying is as follows, that the real place of reward and punishment, the real of existence of a human being, is in their spiritual life, spiritual reward and punishment. However, material success and prosperity is necessary in order to be able to do that which is important, do that which is good, and focus on it. Why should we have to spend lives distracted by the struggle of material existence if we are genuinely able to focus and use our lives well? Now, the Rambam obviously is aware that life is not so simple, and he speaks about this elsewhere. There are many wonderful and good people who struggle mightily, and there are many people who neglect Torah and mitzvahs who prosper. Nonetheless, at least in principle, all else being equal, if there are no other factors at work, this is how the world ought to operate. By the way, that there are suggestions in the Rambam elsewhere that the Rambam thinks this works on a societal level, but not necessarily on a personal level. Very interesting, if you look in Shema and Kriya Shema, if you look in Bechukosei, if you look in the Torah and the Brachos and Klodos, the linkage is actually very often communal and national rather than individual. And the Rambam believes that the health of society, the spiritual health of society, affects its material well-being. The Rambam thinks that the spirituality in the Torah isn't just a necessary precursor or precondition to a spiritual life, but it's also necessary for the national life, for a healthy society. And the Rambam is of the belief that a society which adopts decadent values of Avodah Zarah, of paganism, or immorality, Gilai Arayos, or murder, Tzicha, or theft, or loses relationship with Hashem, is unable in the long run to remain an ethical society, and an unethical society in the long run will fall apart. So the Rambam believes, unlike certain other thinkers, certainly in Judaism, that all else being equal, inbuilt into the fabric and functioning of the world, if we build a Torah society, this will be a socially and nationally healthy society. It'll be a society psychologically functioning and a society which will prosper. And the world is designed to allow this prosperity so that we can focus on the good things that we need to do in life. If, however, we have a society which chooses to adopt neglect of values and drifts towards the vanities of the time, such a society in the long run will destroy itself, it will eat itself up, it won't be functioning, it simply isn't true to what a human being is, to how humans can live together. If we sink into selfishness and laziness and greed, we will tear each other apart, and a society like that will tumble into non-existence. And interestingly, he says this is in a sense for the well-being of the society, because this is a mechanism built into the system, a feedback loop, where if we become caught up in the vanities of the time, the worst thing for us to have is prosperity, because that will just enable us to neglect spiritual pursuits. And therefore, the removal of physical prosperity and health is a wake-up call and a spur that we need to relook at how we're operating, and hopefully one that brings us back to spirituality and renewed focus on growth in areas that matter. So this is the Rambam's reading of the Psukim, in which he says that material prosperity isn't reward and punishment. When the Torah says, if you follow my path, I will grant reward, success, it's the Torah describing a consequence of a society that lives in line with Torah and mitzvahs. And when it brings us the terrible tochacha, it's describing the consequence of a society that has fallen apart, that has neglected mitzvahs and Torah. How does this consequence emerge? Either because it's inbuilt into how we operate, or through other spiritual mechanisms. But the reality is, if we neglect our national spiritual life, we will flounder. If we invest in our national spiritual life, we will flourish. So reads the Rambam in the Psukim. Why does the Torah mention this? Because it's important for us to know. Because if we do well, we will be given the resources necessary to allow us to focus on matters of spirituality. And if we begin neglecting that, then our physical, the preconditions for our physical flourishing will be removed, and we won't anymore be able to distract ourselves with the vanities of life. So says the Rambam in his reading of Psukim. What this means to say is that the tochacha and the brachos are not true reward and punishment. We're not being given them as a reward for good or a punishment for bad. We're being given them as resources for continued good or removal of resources for bad. Or to put it differently, it's more analogous to an expense account rather than a salary. So the reward for doing good may be the salary you get. The expense account is the resources, provides the resources that allow you to get on and do your job. Physical prosperity is the necessary precondition to allow us to do that which we need to do, and this is what the tochacha is about. This is what the punishments described in this world are about, and these are this is the system of reward and punishment. By the way, this is on some level or other relatable to even for us simple people. I'm not here going into the problem of the righteous suffering and the wicked prospering. That's not the content today. But the idea that in principle, if we are focused on material success, which has the ability not to be stressed by the struggle to survive, we can clearly achieve good things. The idea that prosperity can be a challenge to success and actually the need to struggle to survive can be positive is also one that's relatable to on a very a small level. I don't know about you, for many of us, the fact that we have to earn upon ourselves is a great bracha because it forces us to achieve things that otherwise perhaps we wouldn't. I've mentioned this before in other contexts, but it's a tragedy that a lot of the time when we're flourishing, when our health is fine, we don't stop to appreciate. And actually, it's when, God forbid, either we or someone near to us has a little bit of a health challenge that we stop and think and actually appreciate the gifts of good health. Now, I'm not here putting forward a philosophy of seeking suffering, and I'm also not putting forward a philosophy of this is an attempt to explain bad things that happen. I'm simply stating a fact that when we do go through difficult times, very often it's a spur for appreciating goodness and not taking them for granted. And this is really the point that the Rambam is coming from, which is that bracha and material prosperity can be a source for great opportunity and achievement, and it can be a source for distraction and loss of focus. And this is the system that the Torah is offering. So is in the Rambam's thinking, is poverty good or bad? The Rambam says it depends. If you are able to use wealth successfully to remove the need to focus on the struggle to survive and get on and do good things, then material wealth is a great bracha. If someone is going to drift towards decadence and non-focus, then it is a great klala. I think, by the way, this is why the Rambam here uses this metaphor of Eitz Chaim, the Torah is a tree of life. Because what I think he's saying over here is, I think he's using an analogy from farming, from produce bearing. A tree produces beautiful fruit. How does it produce the beautiful fruit? By drawing in raw material, the earth and the mud and the sunlight and air, and out of that emerges these delicious fruits. And I think he's saying this is the analogy for what Torah is. Torah draws in the coarse physicality and hopefully produces fruits of a refined human being who transcends physical existence with their wisdom and insight and good deeds, which are the fruits that we wish to produce. And he's saying this is what the material prosperity in the Torah is for. So when he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a Torah, which is the tree of life, and therefore when we do it, we can achieve true life, which is the spiritual existence, but the material goods that are granted us are what enable and facilitate us to do that. I think he's deliberately, in his masterful use of language, using this metaphor of a tree to bring this out. The true fruit is 8 times. The tree of life is life itself, spiritual existence. But the spiritual existence has to be earth. There has to be, a tree needs roots. It needs to draw in raw material, and out of that produce fruits, which are the produce that it produces. Okay, so this is part one of the Rambam's answer. Why does the Torah speak about rewards and punishment in this world? After all, surely Rabbi Yaakov taught us in the Mishnah in Kedushin that schar mitzvah b'hayal maleka, that there's rewards, true rewards for mitzvahs are not in this world. Surely Rabbi Yaakov taught us that this world is like a corridor to the next world. Surely the true purpose of existence is for us to transcend our physical existence and become beings of spirit and ruchnius and morality and kedusha, which isn't about material success. So why did the Torah go on about material success? Answer the Rambam, this isn't schar. This isn't the description of schar, the oination of reward and punishment. This is the description of investment and divestment. That's what's going on. Investment in us as human beings in order to flourish, and divestment if we're misusing our resources. It's a story of expense accounts and withdrawal of expenses. If you're given an expense account and you work productively and you carry on bringing the profit back to the company, your expense account will be granted next year. If you use the expense account to go and party, the expense account will be withdrawn. That's how the Rambam is seeing things. And again, I'm leaving aside here the complications of how the Rambam would address the fact that the world doesn't always seem to operate in this manner, but at least as a spiritual principle, this is how the Rambam believes things operate. And I speak here with care because I'm conscious that all of us go through extreme difficulties at times in our lives. And the purpose of this shiur is not to sort of simplify things and say, when we're doing right, everything's wonderful, and if things go horribly wrong, it's because we've messed up our spiritual lives. That's a broader subject. All I'm saying over here is within the message of the Torah, within the message of the Rambam, that all else being equal, our physical flourishing, at least on a national level, seems to be linked to the spiritual condition of our nation. This is how the Rambam understands it. So we ask two questions. Why does the Torah speak so much about physical reward and punishment? Answer the Rambam, it doesn't mean physical reward and punishment, it means physical investment and granting of facilities in order to allow us to flourish. What about the second half of the question, though? Why does the Torah not speak more fully about spiritual reward and punishment? And here the answer, I think, is linked to a Mishnah in Avos. And this is the source at the bottom of page 2. A Mishnah in Avos, Perek Daled, Mishnah Beis. And the Mishnah says as follows: Mitzvah, gereres mitzvah, va'avera gereres avera. A mitzvah draws after it a mitzvah, and an avera draws after it an avera. Sheschar mitzvah mitzvah, or schar avera avera, because the reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah, and the reward or punishment of an avera, a sin, is an avera. So what does the first half of the Mishnah mean, and what does the second half of the Mishnah mean? So the first half of the Mishnah says that a mitzvah draws after it a mitzvah, and an avera draws after it an avera. This is either a psychological truth or a philosophical truth. It's either a psychological truth that when we get into a mode of doing mitzvahs, we continue to do mitzvahs, and when we get into modes of doing sins, we end up in a place that drags us ever further to sin. Or it reflects the first part of what the Rambam says. The reward that mitzvah draws after it other mitzvahs, because when we do a mitzvah, we are provided with the resources and opportunities to do further mitzvahs, and when we do averos, we lose the resources and the opportunity to do more mitzvahs. And therefore sin draws after it sin, and mitzvah draws after it mitzvah. But then the Mishnah says a second point, and it says the reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah, and the rewards of an avera is an avera. What does this mean? So here there is uniform agreement between the Rambam and the Mekubalim that what this Mishnah is saying is that the true reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. The debate between the Rambam and the Mekubalim is in what way? But the true reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. In other words, we shouldn't think of spiritual reward as, if we do mitzvahs, a kindly old man in the sky gives out sweets. And if we do averos, a difficult figure punishes us for it. But we should see that the true consequence of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. A true consequence of the avera is the avera itself. Putting this in Maimonidean terms, in terms of the language of the Rambam, this means to say that every time we do a mitzvah, it molds us into a certain sort of person. Some mitzvahs we understand easily how it molds us, and other mitzvahs are more difficult. The mitzvah like Kabed V'Sabichel Esamecha. If we honor our parents, we become a different sort of person. We become an appreciative person, a person who knows how to show honor to others, a person who's able to connect to previous generations. We emerge as a different sort of person. We are a Makabed, someone who gives honor. If we keep Shabbos, we become a different sort of person. We become a shomer Shabbos, someone who guards Shabbos, who keeps Shabbos, someone who has internalized into ourselves what Shabbos gives us, the fullness of existence that Shabbos grants us. So mitzvahs mold us into certain sorts of people. The Rambam believes that the effect of mitzvahs exists on the psychological, the intellectual, the mind, consciousness. That's the way in mitzvahs mold us. And each mitzvah has a effect on our conscious sense of self and how we move through life. The Mekabolim say there is also a molding effect of mitzvahs on a level not accessible consciously, spiritually, through our neshama. So when we put on tefillin, the Rambam would say that this is an act of binding something to ourselves, to our hands, binding something to our minds. And it's a physical act which reflects the meditative experience which we're meant to undergo, in which we realize our actions are bound by Torah, our thoughts are bound by Torah, our life plans are bound by Torah. We walk through a door and we pass the mezuzah. The Rambam says, as per the Pshuta, the simplest understanding of the Parsha, we walk through the door, and that sets the path that we are meant to follow. We go in and out, going in and going out is determined by the Torah, and it profoundly influences how we live our lives and the sort of people we are. The Mekabal and the Kabbalists say it has a deeper effect, even if we are not really focused on the mitzvah, even if we're not consciously contemplating the mitzvah, just the mere metaphysical reality of having tefillin bound to our body, the mezuzah on our door, has an impact on the sort of people we are. But both schools of thought agree that the essence of a mitzvah is the impact it has on us, how it molds us into being a different sort of person. In fact, both the Rambam in his Mishnah Torah and the Kabbalists in their writings use the same language to describe mitzvahs. And they talk about mitzvahs as eitzos. Eitzah is advice. Now, they don't mean that it's advice in the sense that it's suggestions, which you can choose to keep or not. What they mean is just like advice isn't a goal in itself. Advice is a means, a methodology to get somewhere. Similarly, mitzvahs are a means, a methodology to get somewhere, to achieve a certain achievement, to make yourself into a certain sort of person. And it is that sort of person which is what the Torah is aiming for, which tells us is the fullness of human existence as emotional beings, as physical beings, and as spiritual beings. Which means to say that irrespective of Olam HaBa, what the Torah is telling us is that this is a good way to be. This is what it means to be a good person. With or without the world to come, keeping Shabbos allows us to be what we are meant to be. Honoring parents allows us to become the people we are meant to be. And even the chukim, where we don't understand the reasons behind the mitzvahs, somehow or other mold us into being certain people, a certain type of person, which is good, which is how a person ought to be. Now, this message was taught in the second or third Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, in which the Tana taught, don't be don't be a servant who serves God in order to receive rewards, but be a servant who serves God not in order to receive reward. The Rambam says that this Mishnah was misunderstood by the Talmidim and led to the founding of the Sadducees, the Tzaddokim, or the Talmud called Sadduk, who understood this Mishnah to mean there is no such thing as the world to come. But what was the Mishnah really teaching? A more profound statement, that irrespective of external rewards, the reward of the mitzvah is inherent in itself. Even were there not to be an external reward, the mitzvah carries within it its own quality, its own purpose for us. In fact, the Mekabolim and Rambam both go further, and they say it's this very molding into a different sort of person which offers the reward itself. In Olam HaBa, we arrive at Olam HaEmes, the world of truth. We're stripped away of the illusions of physicality, where we can distract ourselves to think that success is found in power, or pleasure, or greed, or laziness, or dominance, or material prosperity. And we realize that true existence is found in what we make of ourselves, meaning and purpose and transcendence. True existence, an act of chesed, where we help someone who's struggling, is true existence. We've made of ourselves something of real purpose and achievement. And all the stuff that goes on that we distract ourselves with, this is ultimately just an illusion. It's a way of getting through life, but doesn't carry within it true existence. If we arrive in Olam HaEmes, we're stripped of illusion, we realize actually the greatest joy, the greatest fulfillment is things of true worth that we've achieved. And if we, even though when we live in Olam of Sheker, in a world of falsehood, we may momentarily forget this. The agony of of punishment in the world to come is really the devastating agony of failure. And the reward of success is really the reward of genuine and true accomplishment, of genuine having made something of ourselves. The analogy of this, and this is only an analogy, is in areas of other success. So we know the experience of working hard to achieve something, an incredible sense of accomplishment. The thrill that athletes has when they stand on the podium having won a gold medal isn't the thrill of the value of the gold medallion that's given to them. It's knowing that the perseverance and hard work and effort they put in has achieved something of genuine accomplishment. In truth, even that is a self-distraction, really, in essence, because ultimately it's also something that only if used for good carries a purpose. But there is a genuine accomplishment that lies behind it. If the person who has arrived at the peak of Everest knows they have been airlifted there by helicopter, there's no sense of accomplishment and achievement in that. The accomplishment is in the sense of something real has happened. The devastating sense of failure, whether it's the athlete who doesn't get the medal, not because they couldn't and did their best, but because they neglected their training. The devastating sense of failure about someone who can look back on their life and say, where have the dreams of my youth gone and haven't achieved anything of genuine worth? The devastating sense of failure when a person realizes they've let down their own standards, that is the devastation of which there is no comparable pain. So the Mekabolim and the Rambam agree that the true reward is found in what the mitzvah gives to us, how it has molded us into a being of transcendent worth, who has achieved something of genuine worth, and true punishment is found in the devastating non-existence and emptiness, the void of deep and dark emptiness that is found when we haven't achieved anything of real value. Now, again, this is not the forum for a lengthier discussion of what we mean by Olam HaBa. I think I have recordings available of the Sunday morning philosophy shiur when I speak about this at greater length. In our thinking, the world to come is not a static state. There is motion and fluidity within that himself, and there is opportunity of repair of missed opportunities. So this isn't aimed at a sense of this isn't aimed as a depressing message. But the Rambam, in his translation of the Mishnah, Reb Chaim Volozhin, in sharing the same idea in the school of thought of the Mekabolim, translates cha mitzvah mitzvah as the true reward of the mitzvah is the content of the mitzvah itself, the goodness that the mitzvah carries within itself, and the way that molds us into being a certain sort of person. Schar avera avera, the true reward or retribution of an avera, is in how the avera itself has molded us into being a certain sort of person. Now, if this is the case, says Reb Chaim Volozhin, we understand why the Torah doesn't describe the rewards and spiritual rewards and punishment of mitzvahs, because there is no external reward and punishment. The true reward and punishment is what the mitzvah carries within itself. The Torah doesn't say, keep these mitzvahs because then I will reward you in Olam HaBa. It says, keep these mitzvahs because then you will be a keeper of these mitzvahs. You'll be a different sort of person. You'll be someone who has molded and formed and made of yourself a mitzvah observer essence. You'll be someone who has connected with reality. Therefore, the external description of rewards is actually missing the true depth of what the Torah is saying. Now, again, the Rambam says, don't misunderstand me. When I say there is no external rewards and punishment, when I say, like the Mishnah and others, don't be like someone who serves Hashem in order to receive reward. Don't become a Sadducee from this. God forbid. We're not saying that there isn't an Olam HaBa. There is a world to come. There is an Olam HaEmes. There is a world of reward and punishment. But this world of reward and punishment shouldn't be seen as something external to what we have achieved. It is built and constructed from our very achievements themselves. This is why we refer to it as Olam HaBa. Often trying to say Olam HaBa is the world to come. The literal meaning of the Olam HaBa, grammatically, I think, is the world that is coming. In other words, haba. That is. You're a better grammarian than I. Is this? I think this is the correct. This is the correct translation. Haba. That's it. That is coming. In other words, it's the world that is in fluid motion constantly as we traverse our physical existence, as we traverse life itself. So, with this said, I think we have answered our questions. And I think that we perhaps have a depth of understanding of what Sefiras HaOmer is about. We asked, why does the Torah speak about physical reward and punishment? The Rambam explained that reward and punishment described in this world is that of resources and material needs and means for performing more. Eitz Chaim, the metaphor of the tree that draws in earth and raw material and produces out of it fruit of transcendence. The non-description in the Torah of spiritual reward and punishment is because the spirituality is embedded in the Torah, in the mitzvahs themselves. If we are looking for external reward and punishment, we're missing the point. True Olam HaBa is a state of existence, of consciousness, of neshama, in which we are no longer physical beings, no longer distracted by the delusions and illusions of physical existence, in which we're able to appreciate that true meaning, true pleasure, true existence comes from the good we do and what we have made of ourselves, and true pain and destruction and inner devastation comes from that which we have destroyed of ourselves. In other words, the metaphor of viewing life as an obstacle course, which is how we often taught to view it, in which there is an end goal, the world to come, the reward waiting for us, but we have to get there. And to get there, we have to clamber over obstacles and, weave our ways, crawl under barriers till eventually we arrive at this predetermined reward, is the wrong metaphor. What it really is that we are creating the reward itself. Better to view it, if one is going to view it as an obstacle course, as the purpose of the obstacle course is to come out at the end fit and healthy. I've exercised. I may think that the reason I'm going through this obstacle course is because at the end I will receive a bar of chocolate, but in truth, when I get to the end, I am told that the bar of chocolate was an immaturity. It wasn't the real motive. The real motive is what I have made of myself. I come out and they say, you know what the reward is? Look at yourself. You're someone who's picked up these skills, someone who's picked up this physical fitness, this energy. That's the true reward of the obstacle course. The challenges and barriers that we face in life, the true reward is, look how you emerge from this if you accomplish it. The Rambam gives the analogy in his commentary to the Mishnayos of how we motivate little children. So a little child, when they're young, parents say to them, if you do your spelling test, if you learn your times tables, we'll give you a sweet. The child gets a little older, and the reward has to become a little more sophisticated. And, they say if you study, if you're at secondary school, we'll get you a bike. So the reward has become more sophisticated. They enter their teen years, and we say to them, work hard in your education so that you can get good GCSEs and A-levels, so you can earn a livelihood, so you can get a good job. But all of this isn't really the truth. Because the real reason we value education is what it does to them. We want our children to be educated. We want them to be beings who have power of reason, power of sophisticated thought, both in Torah and secular studies, understand the world around them, both in Torah and secular studies. With the real reason we want is, even if we secretly know that we are secret millionaires and they will be funded for life, we still want them to get a good education because we realize that enriches them and changes them into a different sort of person. So the chocolate bar, the bike, and even the good job were all distractions from the real truth is, which is we wanted the formative and molding power of education. So the Rambam, this is the metaphor for Torah. We may need to distract ourselves by hoping for the chocolate bar at the end of the obstacle course, or the bike at the end, or even the good job at the end of the obstacle course. But the real achievement is how we are molded and formed into beings. And it is this which is the reason why Sefiras HaOmer is structured in the way it is. Because Sefiras HaOmer is not that there's an end goal of shiur, it's a preordained end goal. The metaphor of the chinuch isn't that the Evet has an end date when he is going to be released, and he's counting down towards the end date. In fact, if you look at the chinuch, that isn't what he says. He doesn't say there's an end date. The metaphor is that the Evet, the slave, or the prisoner, is working and repairing themselves and reforming themselves and earning their freedom. The metaphor of the move from Sefirat HaOmer is, as we said, it's a countdown from Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's being built. When we're counting the Omer, we're not saying there's 48, 47, 46, 45 days left to the Omer. This is the idea that somehow there's a reward waiting for us at the end, and we just have to get through a process to get there. It's the opposite. There is a reward for us at the end, but the reward is the reward that we have built and made of our own spiritual existence, our closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Kedusha and Torah we've built into our lives, the refinement and improvement we have made to our minds, to our neshamas, to our beings. The metaphor is counting day by day by day. I've built one day since the low point of Yetzias Mitzrayim. I've built 2 days. I've built 3 days. I'm counting up till eventually we count day 49. Now I'm ready. I've made of myself someone who is ready to receive Sefiras HaOmer. So the chinuch's answer is correct. Indeed, this is a counting towards an anticipated event. It's not a counting which is a countdown in which the goal is there and we are simply trying to see how many days left as we wait impatiently. It's rather counting up in which we have finally done enough self-exercise, self-improvement, in order to receive the reward which is there for us. So that brings me to a conclusion of what I want to say. Once again, I apologize to those online and to those who are here live who got distracted by the technical challenges. And in Mitzvah Hashem, we shall have a continued successful count towards Schar Mitzvah Mitzvah.